Duelist Nexus is here, and so many decks got buffed with new support from this set, but one of the scariest decks that nobody likes playing against also received some amazing support. Let's talk about Dark World. I'm going to show you my current list. We'll go through the card by card, and I'll show you exactly what I'm playing and why I'm playing it. And hopefully by the end of this, not only will you see what makes this deck so scary, but the fact that it got more support just makes it that much better. But first, as always, before we jump into this, please go grab yourself a cup of coffee or something. That way you guys can sit down and tune in. Let's do this. Alright, so Dark World is by far one of the scariest decks, no matter what deck you're playing, especially when you're going second. The fact that this deck can put up some of the craziest first turn boards while also potentially hand looping your entire hand makes for one of the scariest decks to have to go against, even though this deck does come with some flaws. Kind of like Droll and Arise Heart. But without wasting any more time, let's hop into the monsters. For the first one, of course, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Snow, our generic searcher for the deck, and 3 copies of Genta, the one that searches our field spell. I don't think there's really any reason to have to explain any of these. Obviously, these are the best searchers in your deck. Like I mentioned, Snow being able to search any Dark World card is really amazing. And then Genta being able to get you your field spell while also being a free level 4 body obviously really ties this deck together, especially because, again, none of these are once per turn, except for Genta's summoning effect. But then after that, for the boss monsters, we're running 2 Rainbow alongside 2 Grapha. This looks a little weird. I see some players will run 3 of the Rainbow because it's an amazing search card for the deck. But now, with the addition of Dark Corridor, this deck is so much more consistent, and you can really just trigger any Dark World effect you need at any time. So for that reason, I think 2 and 2 is fine. And to kind of keep up with the pattern, I'm also opting to run 2 copies of Silva alongside 2 copies of Ceruli. Obviously, these cards are here for the hand loop portion of this deck, but they're just generically good in this deck, whether you're going for the hand loop or not. Being able to spam Silva to the field and bring back Rainbow, that way you can bring back Grapha, makes it to where not only are you getting a bunch of free bodies, but your hand gets to fill itself back up every time you're summoning monsters. And of course, Ceruli being able to summon itself to the opponent's field and make you rip a card out of your hand not only helps trigger your effects, but gets the secondary effects as well, which is insanely powerful for this deck. Plus, another cool thing to mention is this card does help you against evenly matched, but it also helps you in your worst matchup in the form of Kashtira by helping put a body on the field. That way they can't freely special summon their monsters. I think it's no surprise cards like Dimensional Shifter and of course Arise Heart are insane against this deck, so we'll go over it later, but we definitely have a few tech options in this deck to help combat those cards when we're going second. But that's it for the Dark Worlds, nothing too crazy. You could get away with 1 Ceruli and 1 Silva, but right now with Bystials running around, I just feel safer having 2 and 2. Plus, if you draw them, then, well, you don't have to search them. So that's pretty great. Now, for the part of the deck that really puts it over the top, the dangers. Of course, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Nessie because, well, it's essentially any danger in your deck. But then after that, we're also playing 3 copies of Danger Bigfoot, not only being a level 8 body to exceed with, but also being able to pop monsters when it's discarded comes up super clutch. Because again, it doesn't actually have to hit the grave, so against something like a Rise Heart, this is one of the best pseudo-engine ways to help out that card. But then after that, we're playing 2 Mothman. I would entertain playing 3, but space is a little tight, and I think it's pretty good because it does help set up rank 4s. Instead of the 3rd Mothman, I'm opting to run the 1 Chupacabra. Again, it's also a Fiend, so it has synergy with the field spell, so that's pretty nice, but it's also a Reborn if ever it's discarded for one of your dangers. But then the last one I'm opting to play, of course, is the 1 Jackalope. In my opinion, it's probably the best one in the deck. Being able to tutor out any body you need, whether it's a level 4 or a level 8, is always something that's very useful. But then for the supporting monsters, we are also opting to run the 1 copy of Zephyros. This card is both the best and the worst card in this deck. It is so free once you get it into the grave. If you can't find a way to discard it, you could always normal summon it and then use it as a link material. You really don't need your normal summon in this deck. But obviously, Zephyros is an amazing extender for this deck, not only helping you set up rank 4s and link climb, but also bouncing your field spell back to hand so you can use it multiple times in a turn. And then the last monster we're opting to play, it is a Fiend as well, but we're opting to go with 3 copies of Lava Golem. The only other option I'd entertain is the Dark Kaiju, which I will talk about in a sec, but I really feel like Lava Golem's just the best option coming into this format. Right now, most Kashtira players are going Arise Heart with Shangri-Ira and Fenrir, so obviously this card helps you clean up that field pretty easily. But also now with the addition of the new support to the Mana Dome archetype, this deck puts up some really crazy first turn boards, and being able to choose which 2 monsters you want to get rid of rather than just one with a Kaiju really makes it to where, in my eyes, this card is a lot better than the Kaijus, at least into this format. But that's it for the monsters, nothing too fancy. Again, like I said, you could cut down on Cerulean and Silva if you're trying to fit more things, but for what I've been testing, this has been working out pretty dang good. But now moving on to our spell cards, we're only playing 2 of the new Dark Corridor. This is one of the best Rota cards I've seen in a long time. You essentially add a Dark World from deck to hand, and then of course discard a card, so it enables you to trigger literally any Dark World in your deck at any time. This is also pretty cool because you don't have to discard the card you add, so if you have a danger, you could also discard that to trigger its effects. This actually comes up really handy whenever you have an Arise Heart on the field and that Bigfoot's in your hand, so that's something to keep in mind. I'm really torn because technically it is one of the best cards in this deck, but the fact that you draw so many cards makes it to where, since it's a hard once per turn, I think 2 is good enough. But then after that, of course, we're going to be still running 3 copies of the Field Spell, the best card to abuse in this deck, and of course you get to recycle it with stuff like Zephyros, so that's pretty amazing. And then on top of that, we're playing the 1 fusion spell, the Dark World Ascension. I think 1 is good enough, and then I'm still opting to run 1 Dark World Archives. This is also a card that's cuttable, but if you can get this card online, it can generate a lot of advantage out of nowhere, and I love that. But then after the Dark World spells, I'm actually opting to run 2 copies of Trade-In for consistency. Now really quickly, going back to the Dark Kaiju, if I were playing it, I would actually opt to play 3 copies of Allure of Darkness. This card would also add consistency to the deck, and it's something to consider. Allure doesn't work with Lava Golem, so that's something to consider, but Trade-In not only works with the Lava Golems if they're dead going first, but you also have Grapha you can pitch, you also have Rainbow, and of course, you have the Bigfoots to discard, and technically Nessie can get you there as well, and then of course Snow can make it live as well by searching out the Dark Worlds. Keep in mind the Dark Worlds don't get their effect, this is cost, but the Bigfoot will, so that's another way to out Arise Heart. I definitely see a world where I'd even entertain playing 3, but I think 2 is good enough because again, you just draw so many cards already. I don't want to draw multiples, especially if I don't have access to a level 8 at that time. But speaking of other draw cards, of course, we got to play the God card, Card Destruction. I feel like once this deck gets going, you're gonna see this card, and that's why I think playing 1-ofs in this deck is really insane. Very similarly, for that reason, we're also playing the 1 Triple Tactics Thrust. Going first, this doesn't really search too many things unless you happen to run into a Bestial, but again, you can just discard it with some of your cards if you really don't need it. Oh, and one quick note about the Talents cards, you give your opponent a Ceruli, so they'll have a monster on their field, plus it's your opponent's monster effect activating, so activating Thrust and Talents, which we'll talk about in a sec, is that much easier. Thrust is one of the best spell cards in this deck, especially going second into Arise Heart, because not only can we search out any of our normal spells that we need in that moment, but it also gets us access to the 1 copy of Talents. I don't think this card needs any explanation as to why it's so good against Kashtira, being able to get you a free Zeus and clear all the follow-up. But again, you only need to play 1 of this because you dig through your deck so consistently, and you also have Thrust to pull it out of the deck. Hands down, Talents is one of my favorite cards, so I really want to play more, but again, in this deck, it really just doesn't make any sense. So that's it for the main deck, and it's a solid 40 cards. Again, there's a couple of tech cards you can move around, but this has been testing really consistently for me as of right now. But really quickly, before we hop into the extra deck, I just want to thank everybody who's been supporting the channel. I really appreciate it so much. But also, if you're looking to go the extra mile, please, there's 2 links down below, one to Next Level Anime and next to Smart TCG. Next Level Anime is the guys that make the gear I wear now and what I wear at events. They have so much amazing anime gear to choose from, and I love them so much. And then Smart TCG makes amazing TCG gear. Not only do they have awesome magnetized deck boxes, but they have some amazing smart field centers for you to choose from as well. Both of them use the same promo code, Cards&CoffeeTCG, so if you use those at checkout, a portion of that profit comes back to the channel, helping me make content for you. But with that out of the way, moving on to the extra deck, of course we're going to be playing 2 of the Fusion Grapha. This card is so good, being basically a pseudo Omni Negate for the deck. I would argue you could get away with playing 1, but I like having a second in the grind game, so that's why I'm opting to run 2. But after that, for some of the Link monsters, we have the 1 copy of the Muckraker, being able to essentially bring back any Fiend from your graveyard and then discard a card to trigger your Dark Worlds or even your Dangers. But then after that, we're also playing the 1 Akashic and of course the 1 Security Dragon. These are both for the hand loop combo. You actually don't even need Security Dragon, but it does come up at times. Both of these are just generically good removal cards as well when going second, being able to bounce your opponent's card, so that's something to keep in mind. But then for the last Link too, I'm still running the 1 IP Masquerena. There are going to be times that you can't go full combo, so being able to end with this card on the field, that way you can go into Unicorn or Appaloosa, makes it really great. Now, like I mentioned, of course, there's the Unicorn for the IP play, plus being a generically good Link 3 when going second. And of course, like I said, the Appaloosa Palooza, a great card to end your turn with. It's so good against so many different decks. This deck is so good at spamming the field with bodies, and I really think the link monsters that you play is what really makes this deck over the top. But in addition, we're also running the one Saryuja to obviously just fix your hand whenever you need it. Drawing 4 cards never felt better in any other deck. And then the one last link monster I'm playing as a tech option, it is the one Underworld Goddess. This is because Noir is going to be running around this format, and I definitely want a way to help myself out that card if I get enough bodies on the field. But then after that, we're running 5 Exceed monsters. The first, of course, is Dugaris, very similar to Skull Dread, just another way to dig through your deck and draw more cards, but this has the benefit of discarding a card after, and then you get to trigger a card effect that you've discarded, so that's pretty neat. Then, of course, we have the Plan B, the Baguska, if things aren't working out, if you get hit with Droll and Lockbird, this is one of the best things to end on, that way you don't get killed on your opponent's turn. Then we play a couple of rank 8s, obviously the Coach King. Being able to draw 3 cards is really crazy, and that's why we're going to play it. Plus, it burns, so that comes up in the late game. And then the last rank 8 is the Hope Harbinger, obviously just being another card you can add to your end board if you didn't get to hand loop. Heck, honestly, there's times where I still hand loop you for 4 or 5 and make this card as well. So, again, just another amazing card to add to your end board, and for that reason, you have to play it. And then, of course, the God card, the last card in our extra deck, the one Divine Arsenal AA Zeus. One of the best cards in the game, and with the talents, makes it to where your Cash Tier matchup is that much better. But there's really so many different things you can do with this extra deck. Like I said, there's a couple of cards along the way that I would personally cut if I found something I liked instead. But that's what makes this deck so crazy. It's so versatile and one of the most explosive decks going first or going second. And for that reason, hands down, this is the scariest deck to have to play against, whether you're prepared for it or not. But that's going to wrap things up for today's deck profile. Thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate all the support. Make sure you guys subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. But thanks again for tuning in. And here's hoping to see you guys on the next one. Peace.